This is the third video in our Upper Room series. Remember, in this series, we're looking at the Gospel of John, chapters 13 through 17. And each week, we're looking at the ways that Jesus invites us to live the way he did, through the power of the Holy Spirit. And these 5 chapters are famously called the Upper Room Discourse, because they took place literally in an upstairs room. And it's in these words of Jesus that we get some of his most famous teaching. Our hope is that during this series, we'll all see how these words of Jesus are inviting us out of our comfort zones and into a new way of living. In our last 2 videos, we've seen that if you want to live the way Jesus did, then we need to be servant leaders. We need to understand that we're never alone, and we need to partner with God in what he's already doing. In this video, we're going to dive into John chapter 15 and see 2 more ways Jesus is inviting us to live the way he did. In John 15, verses 5 through 9, we read Jesus say these words, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he's like a branch that's thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be given to you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples." In our last video, we talked about never being alone, because when we've put our faith in Jesus, the Holy Spirit comes and lives inside of us. Jesus is reinforcing that idea. He is the true vine and we are the branches. Apart from him, we can do nothing. Jesus is the power source of our lives, at least he's supposed to be. Think about it this way. Have you ever had to vacuum your house? Growing up, my siblings and I, we had different chore assignments, and it seemed like no matter what, I always ended up having to do the floors. I'd spend a bunch of time sweeping up the hardwood floor, and then it'd be time to vacuum the carpet. Now you've got to understand, the vacuum and I, we've got a love-hate relationship. Ever since I was a little kid, I've loved to vacuum. I like seeing the clean, straight lines in the carpet, and I love that when the vacuum is going, I can't hear any of the sounds around me. But it's a love-hate relationship, because on one level, I really enjoy vacuuming, but on another level, it's incredibly frustrating for me. The most frustrating part of vacuuming is when you're going along, minding your own business, vacuuming the floors, and then all of a sudden, without warning, quick as a flash, you've made it to the end of the cord. Now, if you're like me, you've got slow reflexes. It takes you a little while to realize you're at the end of the cord, and so every single time, without fail, I get to the end of the cord, and I try to push the vacuum forward. I try pushing the vacuum forward 3, 4 times until eventually the cord rips itself out of the outlet and the whole vacuum shuts down. For some reason, it always seems to come unplugged right when I'm about to finish whatever I'm working on. Now, maybe you can relate to my love-hate relationship with a vacuum, but I told you about that relationship to make a more important point. I think Jesus is a lot like a power outlet, and we're a lot like a vacuum. When we're plugged into Jesus, when we're connected to him, we can chug along and do what he's designed us to do. But when we venture too far away from the outlet, when we start to pull on the cord, when we come unplugged, we get shut down. Now, don't get me wrong, an unplugged vacuum is still a vacuum. You can still push it around the house, hoping it will clean up the floors, but ultimately an unplugged vacuum is just a fancy piece of plastic, and it's really not good for much else. The same is true for us. A person unplugged from Jesus is still a person. They can still walk around and hope to accomplish something significant. They can hope to make an impact. They can hope to complete what they were designed for. But at the end of the day, they're unplugged from the source. Jesus said he is the true vine and we are the branches, that apart from him, we can do nothing. We read a minute ago that Jesus also told his followers, "This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples." In this series, we're looking at the ways Jesus invites us to live the way he did. Jesus is the vine and we are the branches. He's inviting us to live the way he did by being connected to the source of true power. He's inviting us to live the way he did, not by relying on our own strength, not by staying unplugged and useless. He's inviting us to live the way he did by relying on and by being connected to the source of true power. Here's the reality. When we're connected to Jesus, we can't help but bear fruit. We can't help but grow in our capacity to love. We can't help but grow in our peace, our patience, our kindness. When we're connected to Jesus, the source of true power, we can't help but become who we were created to be. And if you're like me, then you can look around at the world and it's easy to see we need more love, more peace, more patience, more kindness. But the truth is, the world doesn't want you to connect to Jesus. The world wants you connected to a political party, a sports team, a gender identity, a social movement. The world doesn't want you to produce love, peace, patience, kindness. The world wants you to produce selfishness, division, distraction, anxiety. And when we make the shift back to the source of true power, when we choose to put our trust in Jesus and get connected to Him, then you've got to expect resistance. In John 15, verse 18, Jesus warns His followers, "If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you don't belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. This is why the world hates you. Remember the words I spoke to you, no servant is greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you." Jesus knows that when we're connected to Him, when our lives produce true love, peace, patience, and kindness, then we'll face resistance. And I hope you hear this encouragement, that when you stick out for being connected to Jesus, when you're ridiculed and mocked for your trust in Him, when your love and peace don't make sense to the people around you, remember, the same thing was true for Jesus. And the same thing has been true for followers of Jesus for thousands of years. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated Jesus first. Keep in mind that when you're connected to the source of true power and love, you're never alone. But this verse is so important because Jesus doesn't want us to be connected to Him because He's selfish or a helicopter parent. He wants us connected, He wants us plugged in because that's what we're designed for. Jesus knows this is that the only way for you and I to bear fruit, the only way for us to produce love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, the only way for you and I to be who we were created to be is by being connected to Jesus.